In this lesson, we're going to create the rubber mounts for the controls. Alright, so what I'm kind of thinking of is just kind of a riveted rubber mounting that will attach itself right to the side and then also attach to the controls that we've created. So I'm going to use a technique to create circular type shapes very quickly by using what's called the lathe modifier. So I'm going to go ahead and go to my Create tab, and we're going to go to the Shapes section, and we're going to create a new line, and we're just going to draw out the shape that we're looking for. So I'm going to click a point right here. I'm going to hold Shift and drag straight down, and we'll do something kind of about this length here. And then I'm going to continue to hold Shift, and I'm going to drag out and then up, and just kind of create this stair-step look here. Okay, so something kind of along these lines. And if you need to, you can always come in and modify the vertices. So let's say that it's not quite as large as I need. So maybe we need something like this. Looks like these vertices got off just a little bit too much. So just trying to create an equal thickness here. Alright, so that looks pretty good. I'm okay with that. I'm going to go ahead and pull that up some. And we'll do the same thing here. That looks pretty good. So we've just modified that a little bit. Alright, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this object into a 360 piece of geometry. So it's going to lathe or revolve this shape into 3D geometry. So to do this, let's go ahead and grab our modifier list, and we're going to go down until we find lathe. Okay, and you can see that right here. And you'll see that it creates this 3D geometry, and it kind of looks like a cake. But it doesn't look like the shape that we created, so what's going on? Well, what's happening is it's trying to lathe around the object center. But what I needed to do is actually lathe around the object's minimum side here. So if I go back to my line, it's trying to lathe around this point, but I want it to lathe around this point. So to get that, let's go to lathe and then take our alignment to minimum, and you'll see that that's been created there. So this is what we're looking for. A couple things that you'll notice about this. You're going to notice that we get some dark shadows across the top and even across the bottom, and that's going to be a little bit of an issue for us. And it's easily fixed because all we have to do is check weld seams, or weld core, I'm sorry. We also want to do a quick render of this to make sure that it's rendering out the normals properly, and that looks good. Now if you can see through yours or it looks funny, you might try doing flip normals. And here you can see what that looks like. So if you're getting a result that looks like this, just check or uncheck flip normals. Alright, so now that I have this, I'm going to come in and drop the amount of segments down. So let's take this down to 8, just so that way it's a little bit more manageable. And I also want to go ahead and just convert it to an editable poly. I don't need any of that information anymore, and I'm just going to scale it up a little bit. Okay, so it's something like that. Let's go ahead and just try to fit this onto the joystick or to the control here, and let's just see if it fits to our object. Now if we want to align this really quickly, we can always have the rubber piece selected and then select the joystick and try to align them that way. But again, our center is off on this object, so let's go ahead and go to our hierarchy panel, pivot or effect pivot only, and center to object. Let's do the same thing with this guy, center to object. Now we can select this, align, and now I know that these are perfectly aligned, and I just have to drag that straight down in the Z. So that's going to look pretty good. That's going to fit in there pretty easily. So I might scale this up just a little bit more. Okay, something like that. And you know, to be honest, I don't necessarily like this top portion here. So I'm going to show you how to quickly fix this if you run into an issue with wanting to take away part of your geometry, something that you don't like. So let's select all those polygons right here on top, and we're just going to hit delete, but that leaves us with a hole here. Now if this is going to be covered up anyway, we can always just lift this up into place and then just leave it as is, and we can scale that down, okay, until that's hidden by the joystick. Or if you really need that geometry in there, you can go to the border mode, select that border on the inside, and then we're going to use what's called cap, and that will cap that border with a single polygon. Let's hit Alt and Q just to see what it's done. Now it will create an n-gon depending on what you're capping, and we need to recreate that topology. So I'm going to go to edge mode, or I'm sorry, vertex mode by hitting 1, and then I'm going to cut this for the topology. So select this, go across to here, select this vertex, left click on that one, and then right click to end that cutting process, and there we go. So now I can hit Alt Q to turn off isolation mode, and there we have the rubber piece for our joystick. Now I don't really feel like that is sized properly, so I'm going to scale it down, and then I'm also going to scale it in the Z just to kind of lengthen that some. Okay, that feels pretty good right there. Alright, so now let's go ahead and select these objects and let's group them really quickly. So I'm just going to call this controls and just group. And I'm going to just use it as a temporary group because I want to just position this into place. So I'm going to rotate it, and let's use our view for rotation here. And we're going to rotate that 90 degrees, and I'm just going to move this straight down in the Z. Okay, so something like that. And it's going to be kind of like along in this area here. And now you'll notice that it's pretty much just straight out, and I don't really like how that looks. I kind of want to make a bend in the base, the rubber base of this. So let's go ahead and ungroup these objects. Let's select that rubber base there. But before we do anything, we need to smoothen out. So let's go ahead and use Turbo Smooth, Iterations, Isoline Display. I want to create kind of some rivets in there, so we can do that very quickly by coming into Edge mode, and we'll select this ring, hold Control, select this ring, and I'm going to use Connect, and we're going to slide that in a negative direction so it's kind of closer to the edge here, and we'll hit OK. I'm going to go to Polygon mode and select this polygon, hold Shift and select the next one, hold Control and select this polygon, and then Shift to select that loop. Let's extrude that in a negative direction, and not too negative, we don't want it to go all the way through. So we'll go to something like -0.2 and hit OK. Now if I go to Turbo Smooth, it kind of gives me this neat little look here, and if I want, I can tighten up those details there. So come up here around the edges. Okay, create some nice little edges here. Just really crisp that up. Alright, good. Okay, so now that we have that, let's create a bend in this object, and we're going to do that by creating or using the bend modifier. So I'm going to use the modifier bend, and this works kind of like the taper does. You'll see that we have an angle and a direction. So if I adjust the angle, you're going to notice that the object begins to bend in a certain direction, okay, or at a certain angle. But the axis is off here. So let's go ahead and try the y-axis, and that looks like the direction that I want to go. So I'm going to take that angle down, but it's not quite working the way I want it. I want it to bend from a specific point, not the center. So if you'll remember with taper, we can adjust the center or even the gizmo to tell it where to start the bending process. So I can drop this down to something right around in here. Okay, or you can just adjust the center, okay, rather than the gizmo. Okay, let's go back to our Y. Sorry about that. So let's grab the center. Okay, and that's going to give us kind of the same result there. Alright, so now what I want to do is I want to kind of alter the direction. So it's going to kind of show us how this is going to bend. It basically just swivels around that center. So I kind of want this angled up. There we go. And then I can grab the joystick here and just position that properly. So I'm going to come in here to local and just kind of position that the best that I can. I'd probably do better if I adjusted the pivot point, but I think we can deal with this. It's okay. So something kind of along those lines there. Alright, so now let's go ahead and change the color of this to black. We'll set a gray material just so it matches everything else. So you've seen how to use a couple of different modifiers on this. I'm not really liking how that's scaled there. I'm going to scale that down. You'll also notice this end down here is not flat. We need to add a segment down at the end for that. So that should fix our problem there. Okay, and I just didn't like the size of that, so I want to scale this. I'm going to go to Editable Poly to do that. So scale that in the Y a little bit, and let's actually just grab this edge, or this end down here, and we'll move it into the body there. Now if we go to Turbo Smooth, that'll show us the end result there. Okay, so just position that a little bit better, and then you can regroup that if you like, but I think we're pretty good here with those controls. Alright, so now what we need to do is we need to begin getting the other pieces on the other side of our plane. So in the next lesson, we're going to teach you how to get symmetry for the entire body, and then we're going to start mirroring over all the pieces to the other side. Alright, so I'll see you then.